But freedom is more important than just a sort of comfortable ideological idea that we can, a flag that we can all gather around. Yeah, freedom is the principal reason that the United Kingdom has had a long and illustrious history, successful history. That's what David Frost was essentially referring to, both our history and, of course, given his job, our future. Now, that freedom of action, freedom of thought, freedom of belief, freedom of association, freedom of speech, all freedom under the law, has been fundamental to defining the nation we are today. It's defined our culture, our democracy, our society, our scientific achievements, our economy, our literature. Freedom of thought gave us Newton and Faraday. It gave us Shakespeare and George Bernard Shaw. All right, he was Irish, but we allow that too. And freedom of action, personal property rights, freedom of interference by the state, uniquely made us the home of the first industrial revolution. That was who we are. That was who we are. Yeah. And that's why we hold freedom dear, and why we fight hard every inch of concession. We demand a reason for every concession in freedom that we make. And politicians will tell you different. But great nations are not made by great men. They're made by great institutions and great traditions. And that's what freedom under the law is for us. That's why this battle today is so important, and it's why we believe so strongly in freedom. And of course, not just for ourselves, but also for our children. Because the sort of free society or unfree society we choose dictates the society they will inherit. And we know from our history that a free society is a greater, a better, more economically successful, a better place, a happier place to be. Now, in normal circumstances, these defining principles are, actually must be, at the heart of any conservative government's policy making. Normal circumstances they should be. Now, we've been faced with a global health crisis, and on the scale of coronavirus, the government's claimed powers that under normal circumstances would be utterly unthinkable to anyone holding a genuine belief in freedom. But when faced with that, it's understandable that we've conceded it. But what are those concessions? What are those unthinkable concessions? Being told to stay at home, closing schools, closing businesses, cancelling holidays, forced quarantines, cancelled elections. Did you notice that one? That's probably, you probably thought it was a good thing. Lone doctors being given the power to section people. That's lock people up without a second opinion. Families being unable to visit their dying relatives. Those are the freedoms that were taken away. The list of restrictions is endless. In fact, I could have sit here and used my time talking about nothing but that. And most of it with little or no reference to Parliament. This is critical. Little or no reference to Parliament. In normal times, we wouldn't stand for such state overreach. But when faced with the biggest health crisis in the century, maybe it's understandable. We put the collective health of everybody ahead of individual rights. Actually, in the past 18 months, our government's all too often lost sight of those principles defining who we are as a country, and instead has sought to implement draconian, illiberal and extreme policies that actually fail in the purported. Always a good idea, never touch the controls. If you were in my car and you were a child of mine, I'd have smacked your wrist by now. Got it? We all working?
Sorry, the people online were struggling to hear.
All right, okay. Well, I don't want to shout. So, the point being that all those draconian actions might have been accepted for a while if it worked, but they actually didn't achieve, they failed to achieve their purported aims. Now, there's no greater current example of this disregard for our freedom than vaccination certificates. Or domestic vaccine passports. Now, let me say up front, I'm a strong believer in vaccination. I and all my family are scientists. Odd family I have. My wife and my children are all scientists. And we're all vaccinated. We're all double vaccinated. But we made that decision for ourselves. We made it on the basis of the facts available. This vaccine certificate policy doesn't just smack of a Liberal government. It's actually indicative, in this case, of incompetent government. And I'm going to explain why. In the blind pursuit of vaccine passports, the government's lost sight of what it's trying to achieve. If the aim of the passports is to protect the patrons and partygoers at nightclubs, concerts, and other large events, then this policy fails on its own merits. The latest studies in the UK suggest that vaccinated people infected with the Delta variant, the variant now dominant in the United Kingdom, may host virus levels just as high as those in unvaccinated people. The US Centre for Disease Control has come to the same conclusion, warning that fully vaccinated people infected with Delta variant can still infect others. Now, these are the very same people who will be allowed into nightclubs, concerts, and other mass events under the plans floated by the government. Given these findings, however, a vaccine passport gives a false sense of security for those using them to visit those settings. So not only are vaccine passports illiberal, demanding that we as an ordinary British citizen produce our papers to do something which is normal in our daily lives, they're also actually deceptively dangerous. They will have the opposite effect to that which is intended. However, it seems to me that the arguments being put forward on the grounds of public protection are actually only part, maybe even a small part, of what the government are actually up to here. Have you noticed that the party conference does not require vaccine certificates to get in? Funny that, isn't it? Given that there are thousands here in close proximity over several days, more people and for longer than you get in any nightclub that I'm aware of anyway, you might think, you might think, I'll come back to that in a moment, you might think that the logic of vaccine certificates would insist we have them. I went to some meetings last night that would have been probably closed down if they were nightclubs. They were so busy and packed and people in close quarters to each other, but we don't have vaccine passports for that. In truth, vaccine certificates are not first and foremost about protecting infection in nightclubs. They are in fact an unsubtle and incompetent attempt to coerce young people into getting vaccinated so they can pursue what they view as their normal lives. Ask yourself, which would be a greater incentive for a young person to get vaccinated? Being denied access to a nightclub or being denied access to Conservative Party conference? I'm afraid we lose, yeah? So that's why we're not being challenged here. Indeed, as Steve will probably be able to tell you later, we also weren't required to provide our vaccine passports when we went to number 10, were we?
Indeed. Oh, and I didn't go, but in case they asked.
Yeah, you were on strike, I wasn't. So that's what it's about. It's actually not about public health in that sense. It's about trying to push a policy by a sort of covert coercion, about pressurising people to get vaccinated. Now, some ministers who've had to defend these policies have told me in terms they don't believe in them. Yeah? And one even asked me to make it plain in public. I'm not going to do it here, but that he wasn't really supporting it. They didn't believe in the policy. But ministers who have enthusiastically promoted these policies have done so, frankly, with a pretty loose grip on the science. Michael Gove, to pick one, has said that turning down vaccines are selfish and are putting other people's lives at risk. But this is implying that the benefits of my vaccination are for you, not for me. That the primary purpose of the vaccine is social protection. Well, is it true? No, far from it. Let's look at who actually gains from a vaccination. When a person has received both jabs, as I have, I'm so old, I had it a long time ago, their protection against death from COVID is almost 100%. Almost 100%. Vaccines, of course, also give over 90% protection from serious illness. So by having my double vaccination, I am protected from death and I'm protected from serious infection. But as you've seen, the vaccines are not as effective at cutting transmission. And even those who double jab can go on to pass on the virus. At best, the reduction is 50%. So I'll ask again, who is being protected by this vaccine? Who am I actually hurting by not getting it? Me. You know, it's not my friends, my family, society at large I'm protecting, it's me I'm protecting. So it's not selfish making that decision one way or another, it's just deciding on my own benefit. And so I'll happily grant that Michael Gove will know more about nightclubs than I do, but you know, his grip on science is not so clear. So that's Michael Gove calling now, obviously. I'm sorry, Michael, I'm sorry about that joke. Vaccine passports are a solution looking for a problem. Far from protecting people from transmission, they can make visiting events more dangerous by causing people to drop their guard. The government has shelved the plans for now, or at least they had a few weeks ago, but perhaps not for long. Only last week, the Department for Health and Social Care published their policy paper saying in the event of Plan B, they might have to use vaccine passports. You know what? Rather than wasting time publishing these papers, if they really want to get people to vaccinate, then they should aim their promotion at those people, telling them it's safe, telling them how to do it, making it easy. Frankly, I don't even care if they bribe them. What they shouldn't do is coerce them. That's not the way we work in Britain.